The Mid-America Veterans Museum is a 501c3 nonprofit business. Your donations serve to further the museum's mission of sharing and preserving the stories of our veterans. To donate, visit mavm.org and click on Donate. The content covered in this podcast is for general informational, historical, and educational purposes only. Discussions about historical events, military service, personal experiences, or sensitive topics are presented for educational and archival purposes. The views, thoughts, and opinions expressed by the host and/or guests do not necessarily reflect the official policy or endorsement of the Mid-America Veterans Museum. Neither the organization, host, director, nor the guest shall at any time be liable for the content covered, causing offense, distress, or any other reaction.
Welcome to Operation Insight from the Mid-America Veterans Museum with your hosts, Jason Galvin and Sergeant Ethan Gross. Welcome back, family. Tonight in studio at the Mid-America Veterans Museum, we have a very special guest, and we're proud to have him here. Ethan, go ahead and kick us off.
Sure. Thanks, Jason. We are very proud to have Mr. Brandon Eichholz here with us. Brandon was in the Army active duty from January 2013 until July 2016, and then spent time in the National Guard and Reserves from 2016 until July 2022. I've gotten to listen to Brandon on two different podcasts, from the Eagle's Nest, which they're now getting their second shout out on our podcast, as well as Canine Solutions. Both very fascinating episodes, great interviews with Brandon. Something that really impresses me about Brandon is his frankness with the things that he's endured and the experiences that he's had that I'm hoping we'll get into today. Brandon is also the founder and owner of Sky Soldier Dog Training, based out of Sunset Hills, a veteran-owned and family-operated business. Brandon, it's a real pleasure to have you here with us.
Thank you.
My first question is, tell me how you kept Belleville and Melville separated in your mind growing up.
Great question.
Well, they're two very different places. I'll tell you
helps.
that. Yeah. So, I mean, Belleville is smack in between cornfields and soybean, and there's some normal town center areas. But Melville is a part of St. Louis County, which if you're from St. Louis, there's a very big distinction between St. Charles County. I call everybody out here the island, and my wife is from the island. She gets lost anytime. Hey, go down to Marlboro, and she goes, "Where's that?"
Marlboro Trails.
Right. She's like, I have no idea. So there's a big distinction between Belleville and Melville.
Yeah. Tell us a little bit about your upbringing. I know that your parents were divorced at a very early age for you, and I don't want to insert this word for you, but it sounds as if there was a nasty custody battle that ensued.
Yeah, being 37 now and having kids of my own and being married for a while, I have a much different perspective on all of that compared to when I was a teenager or a young adult. I thought I knew better. I thought I knew I had all the answers. But my parents were 22 when they had me. My dad had this vision of starting a huge family, and my mom, I don't know really what my mom wanted, but it wasn't necessarily a big family, and it wasn't with my dad. And so when you're young and you make decisions, you either own up to it and make it work, or you split, And so, me and my brother's 2 years. I have 7 brothers, by the way, but my only blood brother is about 2 years younger than me. And when we were real young, my mom being young, we spent a lot of time with grandma, and my grandma had a huge impact on me and my trajectory, and claim to fame with her, she's the only woman that never went to voicemail. So, including my wife. So
Nice.
Now, is that the grandmother that owned her own dog business with the grandfather?
Yeah, she worked dogs with my grandfather. They didn't have the business that I do. They didn't have the structural business, but I've got, newspaper clippings of my grandmother with the huge beehive haircut from the 50s, with a dog holding a bird, and that's in her house. There were pictures of dogs that they had trained. There were books, and it was just this. I was so fascinated with all of the pictures, all the different things, and so that was her.
So funny enough, from the interviews I've listened of yours, Brandon, you didn't really know that you had a knack for dog training until you met your wife. Am I understanding that correctly?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So we'll get into that later because that's later on in your story. But I just find that interesting. It seems as though dog training was starting to seep into your life without you really even realizing it.
Yeah. Well, funny enough, my grandmother would scold me about the idea of working with animals.
She tried to distract you.
Yeah,
from that.
yeah. My grandmother's first generation born in the U.S., so she's Irish. She was Irish and Czech, from Czech Republic, and so my great grandma, towards the tail end of life, only spoke Czech. So
Wow.
I didn't know what she was saying, but I knew the sounds. I never knew what it meant. But yeah, she would do her best to dissuade me from doing it. And it's not a negative thing. She was doing it with the best interest because she was a paralegal for about 33 years of her life. And what she saw was lawyers made money. And she's like, you're going to go to law school. That's what you're going to do. You're going to finish school and you're going to go to law school and you're going to be a lawyer and cut all this working with animals things out. It's cute, but it doesn't pay the bills because
Sure.
in 1987, 1990s, dog training wasn't a huge occupation.
Yeah.
It's boomed 200% in 5 years.
What do you think? What do you think the reason for that is?
Humanization of dogs.
Okay. Tell us about that.
Sure. My parents had me at 22, and my grandmother had my uncle, I think, either 18 or 20 something. And so is very common for people to have kids in their 20s. And today, people aren't having kids, whether it's intentional or unintentional. They're just not having kids, so they do absolutely have dogs.
And so when people say my dogs are my kids, they mean that.
I mean, they feel that in themselves and in their heads, but it's not reality.
Right.
But when you do that, it naturally swings the curve for business to facilitate that need.
Gotcha.
You have a really interesting perspective, and it's going to become even more obvious when we get into it more later, Brandon. So this is an aspect of your life that I want to applaud you, honestly. You've had so many different crossroads in your life, from my understanding and from my interpretation of your story, where you've had to make tough decisions, and in some cases you had to make those decisions by yourself without much outside influence or advice. So you played football in high school. I bring that up because I'm curious, do you think that helped you later on when you were in the Army?
It could have. I actually have a Substack that I write to. My wife doesn't want me to rant to her anymore, so she told me to start a Substack and start writing. And I've written about this in full transparency. Like, I had a real big problem with performance anxiety. So, like, getting to where the lights are on and not being able to perform.
Sure. You do well in practice, but game time.
Right,
Yeah.
right. And my wife dramatically helped me with that. And it came up in the Army as well. But for me with football, it was an opportunity for me to be physical. It was an opportunity for me to work as a team, but primarily be physical. In one of those articles that I've written, I talked about how when I was in junior high, I was put on I think it's Strattera, which is a fight or flight drug, and part of the side effect of having a constant custody battle and having parents that are fighting over custody over you for most of your childhood, you naturally go into a state of fight or flight. But because in the 90s, medication is money, whether people like that or not, it is what it is.
Sure.
I just heard today the common test to determine if a child has ADHD, we could probably all fail that test. It's a verbal questionnaire, and there's no blood test, there's no mental test. And so my parents were struggling with me, and I didn't want to go to school. Well, go figure. You're talking bad about my dad, or my dad's talking bad about my mom, and one's saying, if you move here, I'll give you this. If you stay here,
Sure.
I'll give you that. And go figure, the kid's a little messed up. And, so when I went into high school, my dad actually got custody of me because I'd been so violent on Stratera, fights in school, and I'd walk to the office. I'd get to the office, and they're like, what are you doing? You're going to be suspended. And then I would walk home. I just didn't care about anything. And, so going into high school, football was a huge outlet for me to just let everything go.
Sure. The aggression, the anger.
Yeah, well, I mean, it's a component of testosterone. It's a byproduct of life, and the beauty of football, despite what they make it today, because don't you think it's ironic that we have so many concussions, but we have so brand new equipment to stop concussions? I think there's parallels there, but like, football is a way for you to do controlled violence.
Yeah.
And especially for young males, it's a huge opportunity to, especially today, where most 20-year-old men have never been punched in the face, and they communicate like they've never been punched in the face. Like, football can do that for you.
Yeah.
So
we used to box in a garage just with friends, and we beat the crap out of each other.
Yeah. Now if people see kids fighting, it's, call the cops because one of them might have a gun.
Yeah.
So.
Or call CPS.
Right.
The reason I asked about the custody battle, I was a social worker for 2 years. I still consider myself a social worker in some ways, but what you were speaking on is exactly what I've seen, Brandon. When a custody battle occurs, especially for a child at the age of 4 or 5, even younger, of course the child's going to act out in school. Mm-hmm. They're not getting the sustainment and the love and the compassion that they need at home.
Yeah.
And school, I hate to break it to you, I'm sure you agree, school's not the place for that. School's the place for learning.
Right.
And I know in some cases, people wish that it were more compassionate. People wish that it were more like a nursery, but it's not. It's a place for learning.
It can't be. I often say that teachers and cops are on the same end of the trajectory, in a sense of how can they fix people? They can't.
Yeah, they're there in a moment of time.
Right. They're there at your worst moment.
Yeah.
You're not going to put an impact. One of the things about my business that I think is just categorically different from all other dog trainers is I don't care what your dog is or what its problem is. I don't care what its motivation is. We're going to get it to do the task. And the only way I make a difference with the dog is I make a difference with you. I actually sent my brother that's closest to me into social work. He wasn't cut out for it. Because it's heavy stuff. It's heavy stuff,
Yeah,
and you either are or you aren't. And, when I talk to my owners, I tell them the same thing. I use kids as a analogy for this. We have kids that are struggling in school, or we have distracted children, and these parents go, well, what can I get them? What can I outsource? It's you, moron. Like, that's the problem. Yeah. It's not that your kid doesn't want to read history. It's that you're not reading to them. It's that you're sending them to school for 8 hours a day. And if they're a boy, they're bored out of their damn mind because you make them sit down, be quiet, don't talk.
Yeah.
And they're only thinking about being outside and doing crazy stuff.
Exactly.
Right. Being a boy. And so then your kid is coming home, and either you work late or you come home and you spend about 3 hours with your kids. Well, nowadays we have this black box that we keep in our pocket, and we're constantly looking and scrolling at it. So how much actual time are we spending with our children? And then we wonder why when we send our kids to this, this basic, kind of like a magnifying glass, if you will, all the fractures that the kid has become bigger because they're sitting in this setting with this adult that they probably don't trust. They probably don't like. They don't know, and then they're around kids, so there's all this social pressure. So any cracks that this kid has, it's amplified, and it's nobody's fault but the parents. You design those children. That's your responsibility. I don't care if you want the next gadget. Your kids are the gadget that you should care about. And so when I train dogs, I take that same approach. Like, it's not daycare, it's time. We get to the end of 5 weeks, which, by the way, that's a pretty short program for dog training compared to like a lot of the franchise programs that are here. They offer 12 weeks, 14. I do it in 5. Your dog's bit 5 people, come see me. 5 weeks. We'll switch it.
Wow.
And it's because what happens is you go from spending no time with the dog, telling the dog what to do, telling them what not to do, and then you start telling them what to do, and you do it consistently. Well, the dog changes just the same way as a kid. If you spend that extra time where you're sitting there scrolling about who cares what, and you spend that time with the kid, it's going to be a better result at the end of the day.
You're going to see a marked difference.
Right.
Yeah, nurturing. You have to, whether or not you are a nurturing person, you have to nurture your offspring. You have to nurture your pet if you expect them to model good behavior.
Yeah, you can't expect anything you haven't created.
Oh, good point.
There's absolutely no reason why you should have it. And that goes for relationships, that goes for children, that goes for jobs, that goes for your health, that goes for anything. If you haven't put the invested effort forward, you shouldn't expect some different return. You haven't done anything.
Yeah, you're exactly right.
Yep, 100%.
This is the perspective I love. And I know I've only just met you, Brandon, but listening to those interviews of yours, I feel like I know you a little bit better than I really do. Well, hey, so you finish high school and you start your own business as a personal trainer at 19. Something that I found interesting that you had mentioned on one of those interviews, you didn't say this, but I think this is what you meant. You found eventually that you had imposter syndrome as a physical trainer. As a 19-year-old, 20-year-old, you were telling 45, 50-year-olds how to get fit.
Yeah. So before personal training, I actually went to ministry school. When I was 18, my very first stint in college, that was WashU. That wasn't ministry school by any means. I was doing that to appease my grandmother. She was super ecstatic. You know, she's waving the banners, getting all excited. My oldest grandchild is going to be a lawyer. He's going to make so much money. And I think I was like one semester in, and I know exactly why I left. It was preaching from the pulpit of idealism versus reality. And, I remember sitting in class being told that I was better because of something that I couldn't control. And I adamantly disagreed with it. And I was like, this is grossly inappropriate for an educator to take this position with 18-year-old kids in here with impressionable minds. And I'm like, I just can't sit here and listen. And then not only that, have to pay for this? You're out of your mind. So I left WashU and I ended up going to MOBAP. And, MOBAP, I'm the oldest of a total of 9 kids. So I didn't get things and that's fine because I've gotten things on my own, but I just didn't have those things. So if I had to pay for gas, I had to work. And so I just had to make a decision like, hey, this isn't cutting it. I'm going to put a bunch of money into debt to pay for something I don't even know what I want to do. So I'm like, I just can't do this right now. The one thing that I did know that I did like was endurance, working out. Because for me, all this talking that I've done, all this talking that I do for a business and helping people, I've had this since I was like 7 or 8 years old. I've had a monologue. My dad was a big lecturer when I would screw up. And so I would just sit there and I would think. I would go through a whole different list of like what I could say and what it would elicit. And then what I could, I'm going to avoid this. I'm going to say that. But I've always wanted to help people since I was very little. Superheroes. That's how I learned how to read comic books. I can remember like sitting on the floor and learning like juggernaut. That was the first word. And so going into personal training, it was by chance. I was working out at a gym and the manager of the training company was like, hey, you got a knack for this. And I'm like, I don't know what I'm doing. I just like to suffer, and she's like, well, could you teach other people? And I'm like, yeah, it's not that complicated. And she's like, okay, well, take these certifications and then, we'll come figure it out. And so I took those certifications and I was 19 years old and I could tell you the very first person that I sat down with and how my whole mindset changed with that, because that very first person I sat down with did not buy training, and I changed my perspective from that moment, and I remember it to this day. I was 19. I was, had my nice clean shorts on, my nice clean athletic shoes, and this little zipper up jacket, and I probably had gel in my hair at that time or something, and I'm so excited. I've got a clipboard, and I just look like a nerd. I'm like walking, waiting for this lady to come in, and she's 10 minutes late. She's 10 minutes late, and she comes in with McDonald's.
Oh boy.
She's probably either in her early 50s or late 40s, and she's late, and she's finishing up her McDonald's and sits down, and I'm just like, hey, yeah, I'm Brandon. I'm your personal trainer here. I'm going to help you today. And I just throw the whole kitchen sink at her.
Yeah.
And
You probably couldn't wait to get it out.
Oh, no. I was like, I was sweating bullets trying to give this lady training.
Yeah.
And, because in that business, specifically, I had my own business, but we were subcontracted through the gym.
Gotcha.
So they could get away with paying us $6 an hour for an in-person 1 hour session. And this gym had just opened. So I had $6 on the day, and that was my whole day. So I'm like, if I can flip this to a $100 program, I can make a little bit more for 3 more additional sessions. And then if I can flip it from that 3, then I can put her on a 6-month or a year program, because that's what she needs, and I can make a little bit more. And so I was so desperate and so hungry to just give this, because part of the personal training for me was my parents were making such poor health choices my entire life. And I could see, and I've written about this as well, like I was exposed to people that blamed their circumstances and their situations on others. They took away their control to change things by putting the blame on other people. And I saw that as a kid, and I knew that was wrong. I was like, Dad, I'm running in front of the car. You're driving the car. You could run with me. Like, I'm seeing this, and so she ends up not buying training. And it was just a moment for me where I was like, the manager had came in, and she's like, do you care about what you do? And I'm like, yeah. And she's like, okay, well then stop throwing up on people and actually value yourself. That lady was late. That's the first thing you should have started with. And I'm going, she was. And she had McDonald's. And she's like, yeah, but all you did was try to throw the flowers, the proverbial flowers at her to try and get her to buy, when in reality, she's sloppy, she's late, she's unhealthy. She should not walk out without training.
Exactly.
And it was that whole attitude shift for me, where I would sit down with people, and I would literally write out like, hey, it's going to take you 6 months to meet your goal. Fortunately for you, we live in a time where Google exists. You guys can Google every answer that you're looking for. It's going to cost you $1,300 to train with me for 6 months, but you could Google it all for free, but you haven't done it, and you're not going to do it. So you might as well just sign up with me and get it over with and get your goals.
That's a great sales pitch.
Yeah.
And so I went from
real good to me.
not selling anything to number 4 in the company just off of that mindset, that factor switch.
You put that mirror in front of their face and showed them what was up.
Yeah. That's how people change.
Yeah.
They see themselves. Okay. So do you mind if I ask about your father?
Sure.
So if I understand correctly, he passed away 4 years before you joined the Army.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I was 21.
Tell us how that impacted you.
Yeah, that was pretty devastating, earth-shattering, if you will. Part of going into personal training was because my parents were making poor health choices, and I would say I wanted them to like look at me and go, hey, can you help me? I felt like the little kid jumping up and down with a sign going, hey, listen to your kids, and they never did. And
did you ever approach them?
Yeah, all the time.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah. My mom, she'll probably listen to this. She's read all my stuff. She still talks to me.
A little surprising.
It's interesting. But I don't think she expects anything different from me. I've been this way since I was a little kid. So nothing changes. You just get older, you get grayer. But like I went to my mom several times, and I'm like, hey, Mom, let's just go for a walk. And she's like, oh, I think I need to call my cardiologist and make sure I can walk. And I'm like, you walk to the bathroom, you walk to the kitchen. It's just a little further, And, I would say the same thing to my dad. And, my dad had 5 kids with my stepmom, and he was the only one working, and he had epilepsy. So epilepsy is made worse by poor health, poor eating, poor diet, exercise, all of it. It impacts epilepsy worse because epilepsy is kind of triggered by stress.
Sure.
So then having more kids and having no more income coming in probably is
strains your nervous system.
Yeah, he had about, I think, 30 or 37-ish seizures the last year of life. So, it was I remember exactly where I was. I was 21. I was sleeping on the floor in a condo. I shared a room with a pilot, and I couldn't afford a bed, so I slept on a sleeping bag, and I was making it work. And I got a call from my stepmom, and my stepmom and I still don't really get along. And I'm like, what's going on? And she's like, hey, your dad's in the hospital, and doesn't look good. You need to get here. And my dad had seizures before when I was in high school as well, and I had to run up the stairs and carry him out of the bathroom. And so I just figured, like, I'm going to drive to Belleville, and he's going to be in there, and he's going to be cracking jokes, because he had gone to the hospital before after a seizure, and then he was fine. But he wasn't, and so I lost my compass. I lost my safe, like, kind of safe answer, if you will, to where I could go to him with any question. I could, get any help that I needed.
Sure.
I could always go back to my dad, even if it didn't make sense, he would listen to me, which I think for a lot of time, us as parents, we do so much time talking, we don't do enough time listening. And this is not me being woo-woo or modern, but I think it's important, just as important, to teach your kids as it is to listen to your kids.
Sure.
Because they see the world from a different perspective. My 3-year-old is tiny, so he sees this giant human being, and meanwhile I'm only 5'8", so he has a much different perspective. And so I went full into personal training, and I ended up moving to another gym, a bigger gym, and it was just not working out. I was number 4 in the company in this other place, and then at this other place, the people that did memberships, they could sell training for you. So they don't even know you as a person, as a trainer, and they're going to put people with you. And so it was a hard transition. But then not only that, there were people that were pre-PT students, so they had a college degree,
Sure.
which I didn't at the time, and clients would just go to them, flock to them. Yeah, because they're like, oh, well, she's in school to be a PT.
Know what she's doing.
I need to go with her. Or he has this. And I'm like, that's what I need. I need a degree. That's what I'm stuck at. And so I was like, well, I'm not going to pay for it. I'm not going to take out a loan for, again, something I don't know what I want to do.
Yeah.
And so I was like, well, my grandpa was in the Army. My step-grandpa was in the Army. So why don't I join the Army? They'll pay for my school. I could get some... for the people out there, you probably know, a pogue job. I could get some support job and then do school when I'm done with the Army stuff
Sure.
during the day. And I was like, this is it. This is what I'm going to do. I'm going to just get some tech job, work on something. Maybe I'll do underwater welding. That sounds pretty cool, and then go to school on the back end. And so it was solved from there. Join the Army.
You were thinking of drone repair. Is that right? Was that the specific thing you were looking into?
That was the first tech job that was presented to me that I was
Gotcha.
like, this is interesting. A, you had to get a secret clearance, and then B, you worked in Nevada. So
wow.
You're out there, and you're in the middle of nowhere working on drones.
The secret clearance because of the equipment on board.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
That all sounded appealing to you.
Yeah, well,
Yeah.
the way I looked at it, and I think a lot of times, and we talked before we started, I think veterans get stuck in this mindset of, like, just kind of repeating the normal everyday, I joined because I want to be a patriot.
Yeah.
There's selfishness to joining. Even in being a patriot in itself, that's a selfish decision. And it's not bad. Like, I'm not saying that it's bad, but you can't just say that I did it to protect my mom and little sister. Like, that's not
Sure.
That might be the case, but that's not the only reason.
Yeah.
You know, and so for me, like, I joined selfishly because A, I did want to be a patriot like my grandpa, like my step-grandpa, but B, I wanted my college to be paid for. I didn't know what I wanted to do.
It was a perk of the job.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. You know, and if I could...
People go to jobs and do that kind of thing all the time.
Absolutely. You know, and then if I could see the world a little bit while doing it, fantastic. Let's sign me up.
Absolutely.
And a well-deserved perk, too.
Absolutely.
You're
Signing on the dotted line for your life.
At the end of the day, you are putting your life on the line potentially. So now you get hoodwinked, the classic recruiter story. You ended up as
not a bad nod to the recruiters we've had on board.
Well, I think they even admit that sometimes they do these tactics. You end up going 11 Bravo, 11 Bang Bang.
Yep. Yeah. It was actually not the recruiter. So we can't blame the recruiter for this one.
Okay, good.
It was the security clearance guy down in the St. Louis MEPS.
How strange.
Yeah.
What was the issue?
So I wasn't old enough to know this show, but he looked like one of the characters from Fairly Odd Parents. He looked like the teacher. And he was just this nerdy guy, and he had the stamp for security clearance. And so I joined at 25. I also drove shit boxes from the time I was 18, like really bad beaters. And when I was doing ministry work, when I was doing youth ministry, I did youth ministry in Town and Country. And so if people aren't familiar with St. Louis, Town and Country, like the nose is up a little bit, right? And so my brown and blue Cutlass Sierra looked
nice,
like a certain type of car
Yeah.
that would be in the area for no good.
Yeah.
And so I got pulled over a ton, like I no less than 20 or 30 times.
Where are you going?
From
Where
the
are
time
you
I was
coming
18.
from?
Right.
Yeah.
Sir, step out of the car. We need to check your car. Oh, okay. All right, fine. And they're like, why do you have so many Bibles back here? And I'm like, I'm in youth ministry. Like, I just left the church, and they're like, oh, okay, why are you driving this car? I'm like, because I'm poor. Like, okay, and so.
One of the reasons, right?
Right. And I did actually have house speakers in the trunk. That's part of the Belleville perk. So if I was blaring like Skillet or Under Oath through those house speakers, you could hear it from this brown and blue Cutlass Sierra. But so he looked at my file and he goes, because every time you get pulled over, regardless of whether you get a ticket or not, it's a ding.
Oh, okay.
So it shows up on your record. And so he goes, you've been pulled over a lot. And I was like, well, I'm not 18, I'm 25. And I tried to explain all this to him, and he's like, well, I can't give a security clearance to somebody like you in my army. I was an MP. And I'm going, what are you talking about, dude? Like, this is how I get my job. Now, knowing everything I know now about the military, I could have just left and came back a day he wasn't there.
Sure.
And got the stamp.
Yeah.
But I was like, I gotta get out of here. I'm done doing this.
There's that urgency.
I need to go. And because I was I'm still physically gifted. I just like to push the envelope in that stuff. It's easy for me. And so they were like, dude, no brainer. You're gonna be 11 Bravo. And I was like, oh crap. I swore to my mom I would do anything other than infantry. Wow. And I call her from the MEPS office and I'm like, hey mom, I'm going infantry. I'm leaving in 6 months. And she's like, what the hell's wrong with you? And so yeah, I got hoodwinked, but it wasn't by the recruiter.
Good. Okay. No hate on the recruiter then, just that Fairly Odd Parent guy.
Yeah. Yeah.
So you do OSIT at Benning, is that right?
Mm-hmm.
And then directly from OSIT, you just go down the street to Airborne Jump School.
Yeah.
It's good to know a fellow paratrooper. Tell us about your experience at Jump School.
Sure. Well, originally I was set up to go to Fairbanks, Alaska. That was going to be my duty station.
Gotcha.
So I guess it's Richardson is what it is up there. It's a mechanized unit because all I had was infantry. I didn't have anything special. I was just straight up in infantry. And you brought up imposter syndrome with personal training. It wasn't as common or wasn't a prevalent issue for me really in personal training because I would just play a part.
Gotcha.
That switch when I sat down with that lady, I switched the character that I was playing. But when I got to the Army, I couldn't switch because I didn't know anything. In the Hell Week, so to speak, they threaten you with everything.
Yeah.
If you don't wake up on time, you're dead. You're going to get kicked out. And I'm like, I can't get kicked out. I can't go home. can't be a loser and get kicked out. Like I'm not. This isn't that hard. And when I get to basic, I'm just like, they want me to do push-ups, I'm going, and they're like, dude, he's not stopping. And it's not like I'm a physical specimen. When I zone out, I zone out. And so because I would just not seem rattled, they were like, student leadership, you're platoon sergeant. And I'm like, I don't know how to march. And they're like, we didn't ask you if you know how to march. And I'm like, I can't do this. So I ended up stepping down from the platoon sergeant role in basic. And that was the first instance in the military of my imposter syndrome.
Gotcha.
Because I was I was panicking at night, thinking about I don't know left turn, half face, I don't know any of these things. Needless, I could have looked back at this and just been like, it doesn't matter. They're going to teach you.
Exactly.
Just make a mistake. It's okay. Make a mistake and then recover. But at that time, I was like, I have to be perfect. And I couldn't be perfect. So then I guess I became a squad leader. And because of my performance PT-wise and excelling in the leadership aspect and then all the fundamentals, they're like, hey, we're going to give you a RASP contract. And I'm like, I don't even.
So was that, I'm glad you mentioned that because I forgot I was going to say this.
Mm-hmm.
So did they retroactively give you the option 40 contract?
Mm-hmm.
So it wasn't at the recruiter's office. It was after you'd already started basic.
Yeah. Yeah, they do. They've done it. I think in different times they have more contracts or less contracts,
Gotcha.
and because there's plenty of people that have gone it used to be called RIP.
Sure.
I think then it was a 4-week program, and then RASP became either a 6-week or an 8-week program. But they were like, hey, you want to go to RASP? And I'm like, what's RASP? And they're like, well, you get to go to Airborne school. And I'm like, extra $150 a month just to jump on a plane? Okay, yeah, sure, I'll do it. It doesn't pay in the end, but yeah, I'll do that. And so, yeah, I went to jump school, left basic training with a blind, kind of like a robot, where you tell me to do something, I'm going to go how high? I'm going to just do it.
Yeah.
I could jump through fire because you're just so conditioned to wake up, do the job, and just rinse, repeat, rinse, repeat, rinse, repeat. And when I go to jump school, it was not where I needed to be. It's a gentleman's course, and gentleman's course is a nice way to put for jump school. It's not hard. It's not complicated.
Part of the reason, because I've experienced it too, part of the reason that it gets the moniker of gentleman's course is because you have, in some cases, colonels training with privates.
Mm-hmm.
And so...
Really? I didn't know that.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. So what the instructors tend to do, at least in my experience, it's not like you have the similar experience, they instruct to the highest rank.
Mm-hmm.
So everyone gets treated like their colonel.
Yeah, okay.
Mm-hmm.
That makes sense.
Yeah. And it was not a place for new basic training privates because I learned this when I ended up going to the support unit later in my career, how different support units and support soldiers are trained versus infantry soldiers. Because infantry soldiers, you're taught you don't matter. The job matters. And that's not a negative thing. It's a mindset thing because the roles are different, and when I say you don't matter, it's not that you as an individual don't matter and you don't have any value. It's that the job is the priority. And so you haven't earned it yet. That's the mentality that you're taught in the infantry. And so when you go to airborne school, they're like, hey, buddy. You're like, what do you do? And then when you're in your first run for airborne school and you see an E8 female fall out, and you're like, this is a jog. This is a 10. I ran an A group, and so I'm running 7-minute miles every time we run, and we're in this company formation run, and it's a 10-minute or 12-minute run, and
it's slow.
They're falling out, and I'm going, what am I doing here? And they got the movie theater right down the road. They've got, I think it's the Warrior Zone where they've got Xboxes. They've got, all of the things that you didn't have access to in basic training are all right there. So in your mind, you start to think, oh, I've got this. I'm here. I've made it. I've figured it out. Yeah. And you start to get relaxed. And when you get relaxed, especially when you're supposed to go to RASP in just a few short weeks, it totally let all the air out of the sails.
They've, you may already know this, they have changed that trajectory now of option 40. It's no longer that you're guaranteed jump school because so many soldiers were just signing on the dotted line for option 40 so they can get the wings.
Yeah.
And then they drop out immediately when they got to RASP.
Yeah.
I mean, I've seen it happen multiple times.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think you have a perfectly articulated perspective on this, Brandon, especially doing OSIT at Binning as an infantry soldier, an infantryman. You are eating, breathing, sleeping Army, and then you go to jump school down the road, and it's just like completely different. Because you're right. I mean, I heard the same kind of thing. You're not being addressed by rank in many cases. Some people are even calling you by your first name. It's very easygoing, very casual. Not that Airborne isn't an important thing and isn't something that could very potentially take your life, because it is still a dangerous operation in a lot of ways. But jump school, like I said earlier, Jason, you have people as high of a rank as colonel.
Yeah.
And so the instructors, no fault of their own, they're trying to make it all work with having high-ranking officers and low-ranking enlisted service members in their same rank. So it's just difficult to manage.
Is it a team atmosphere or highly individual?
That's kind of a tough question. I don't know, Brandon, if you have a perspective on that.
I mean, it's very loosely team, very, very, very loosely. Like, you might help each other put your chute on, and that's about the extent. I mean, we're in a group setting, we're doing things, but they're watching you PLF, they're doing all of that, but it's really individual. And I would tell you, like, if you do the bare minimum, you're going to make it through the whole thing. And then if you freeze at the door, they're just going to kick you out. So
pull it or don't pull it. It's up to you.
There was a lesson that I learned through Airborne school that I've applied later in life, and a couple jumps in Italy and in Europe that I learned from, but nothing from Airborne school. I mean, it was, if anything, I wish I would have gone to RASP first,
Sure.
and then Airborne school.
I'm glad you mentioned that, because it's a perfect transition. So, in fact, it sounds like, from what I've heard you say previously, that if you had gone to RASP first, you probably would have become a Ranger at the end of the day.
I want to be careful how I say this, because I think regiment, specifically guys with tan berets, I think they had a very important job, and I don't want to lightly say that of course I would have been a part of regiment, but looking at my mentality coming out of basic training, had I gone to RASP, it would have just been like another day in basic, because I think, again, when you come from the support world versus the infantry world, that moment where they tell you that you've made it, it clicks in your brain and you don't work any harder. But when they tell you that you haven't reached it yet, you just keep going. Yeah. And for me, if you guys want me to share my experience with RASP, because it's totally embarrassing, and most people wouldn't share this, but so we finished jump school, because the way the Army works is, stand, hurry up and wait, stand around. And, so I go from basic to jump school. I thought I was going to be able to see my parents, but they're like, hey, just get on the bus and go. And I'm like, my parents drove from St. Louis down here to see me.
For your graduation.
Right. And they're like, just get on the bus. You got to go to Airborne school.
Oh, my gosh.
So I'm in my dress blues, go to Airborne school, and I'm like, got all my gear in my pack and everything, and I'm like trying not to make everything look like crap. And I go to Airborne school, and I'm standing around for like probably 5 or 6 hours. And then eventually one of the jump masters comes up, and he's like, why are you guys in your dress blues? And we're like, we just graduated. I don't know what we called them, probably drill sergeant, because we're stupid privates that just got out of basic. And he's like, hey, knock that stuff off. What do you guys, so you just graduated? Yes, Sergeant. Well, why don't you go see your family? And we're like, because we thought we had an in process. They told us to get off the bus and go, so that was my experience going into Airborne school. And then going out of Airborne school, the guys in the tan berets show up. And they're like, all right, everybody that's going to RASP, load your stuff onto the bus. Okay. And we start loading everything on the bus. Everybody get on the bus. Okay. Everybody's getting on the bus. All right, everybody get off the bus. Chase the bus. And so then the bus takes off, and we run to regiment, so, with the brown fence and everything associated with it, there's a mystique, because the MPs aren't even allowed in the brown fence, which is regiment. And so like there's a gym, I think it's Audie Murphy, and I would work out in airborne school at Audie Murphy. So even though like my mindset was starting to get relaxed, I'd still worked out because that's just what I've done. And so we run to RASP, and we get to there, and they're doing impossible time hacks, which is week 1 of basic training. So it's like starting right back over at the start. Had I been right out of basic training, it wouldn't have mattered because I've been like, I don't matter again. All right. And so we're dumping everything out. We have impossible time hacks. We're starting to say the Ranger Creed. We're getting smoked for not knowing the Ranger Creed. Well, we just got here. Should have done reading beforehand. Didn't do reading beforehand. And then, it just hits me. Like I'm laying in bed the night before RASP is starting to start. And I'm like, I don't want to do this. Like I got a Charlie horse for the first time in my entire life. Laying there in bed, I'm like, I don't want to do this. I just want to get to my unit, do my job, and get done with this. Yeah. I don't know what Rangers are. I don't know what they do. I don't care. This is stupid. And then I come in the next morning. One of my buddies from airborne school, we quit together, and it was a colossal kick in the pants, which is what was supposed to happen.
Sure.
I don't want to paint it like I need sympathy. It's what's supposed to happen. Yeah. You should feel shame when you make these kind of decisions, because shame forces you to adjust. You either go into a dark hole or you adjust. And so I ended up cutting grass for regiment with scissors.
Sergeant Major's grass.
Yeah.
Got to look good.
Yeah, so you're cutting it with scissors. I met some guys that probably have their faces blacked out on pictures, and that was the weirdest part. Recon guys, and I would mop their building, and they've got the cards, the Saddam's kids cards on the wall. They've got all kinds of memorabilia, and I'm mopping the floor. And you're supposed to look at the ground. That's part of the. My wife hates all of this stuff, by the way, but that's part of like the demoralization aspect of getting into these select units. Is you don't look at anybody, and if somebody with a tan beret, no matter what their rank is, you go to parade rest. And when you get to the chow hall, you have to hold your tray so that the regimental scroll is facing you, and then the tab is facing you.
That's great.
And you have to hold it, and you have to look down at it, and you have to eat as fast as possible.
With the spoon?
Yes.
Yep, only the spoon. Okay.
Yeah. And one thing I should say, regiment has the best food in the Army, without a doubt, the best food, when it makes sense. But so I'm mopping in recon, and this guy with a huge beard, and he's got cuffed uniform, which in 2013 you're not allowed to cuff, and he's cuffed, and he's like, "Hey, you want some cake?" And I'm like, "No, Sergeant, I'm good." "Hey, man, relax. You want some cake?" And I'm like,
"Don't do it."
"No, I don't want any cake." And he's like, he came up to me and he was like, "Hey man, I get it. We all make decisions, make better ones in the future. You're going to be all right. This is not the end of your story. Keep going." I don't even know who this guy was. I'm sure he's done a lot of cool stuff. I'm sure he's still, or probably still doing cool stuff. But from that moment on, I was like, I got to get out of here. I got to go to my unit, figure it out. And so.
You were basically in a holding pattern there.
Oh yeah, they call it worldwide.
Worldwide.
Yeah, it is. It is a awful place there, because there's people there that really shouldn't have been in an option 40 contract to start with. Like, you should have seen it at the MEPS or at the recruiting station. You should have seen this person is not appropriate for option 40. You should see this. Then there's people that get hurt, whether intentionally or unintentionally. Sure. And then you have people that maybe have the potential, but because of imposter syndrome, they self-sabotage because they're afraid of not meeting the standard. Even though they really could and can meet the standard, they're afraid to step out. And so I actually ended up trading a contract with a PFC, and that's how I got 173rd.
How about that? Wow.
Yeah.
What did you give him?
He got brag. So
okay.
Yeah, because his wife was in nursing school or something, and so there's.
He wanted to stay stateside.
Yeah, we found out, like, you can, if you have the same rank, the same year contract, the same time coming in, you can trade contracts with people.
don't know if they do that anymore. That's interesting. So, Brandon, I'm glad you mentioned that about Italy and the 173. So, tell us about getting to Vicenza, Italy, and your experience there.
Yeah. So 173rd, it was the coolest, despite the 82nd being the motherland.
Sky Soldiers.
Right.
I want to make sure we get that in. It's the
Sky Soldiers.
namesake of the business.
Yeah. I was in the 2nd Battalion, 2503rd Infantry. With the 173rd, it was kind of funny, but it's kind of on par. We watched Restrepo.
Sure.
Before I went out to Italy. And at this point, I'm like, hey, I'm infantry. I might as well do the whole thing. Let's go. And
sure.
So I get to Italy. I think it was either Memorial Day or Labor Day or something. So it was a Danza, which
sure.
we get a ton of those out there in Italy. Just
I'm sure
we're so far away from the flagpole. And I ended up spending like the first 2 months living in the holdover barracks in Ederle, because there's 2 bases. There's Ederle, Camp Ederle, and then there's Deldin. And Deldin is where 2503rd is, and 1st 503rd, the Rock, is on Ederle. And so I had no orders to which battalion I was supposed to go to, and no supervision.
How did that happen?
Yeah, that's what I'm wondering.
No orders being cut.
Yeah, all I had was 173rd. And so, like, when I showed up, I bought a maroon beret, and I bought a brigade flash and put it on there because I didn't know what to do, and I wanted to make sure I had everything the right
sure.
way. And I spent it might have been a month and a half, maybe 2 months, but basically I would go and do the in-process portion, do all of that. It'd take like first half of the day, and then the rest of the half of the day I'd go to the internet cafe or whatever, or go to the PX, or I just had no supervision.
So tell us about when you finally got your orders cut and you went to your unit.
Yeah, so I got orders to Destin Company, 2503rd, so heavy weapons company, and I was excited because I knew where I was supposed to go now. I had kind of direction, and ended up going down there and just welcome to the unit, and got put in 3rd platoon. So they had just came back from deployment in January, or probably January, February, somewhere around there. So like when I was in basic training, they got off the last rotation to Afghanistan. And one of the things that I should say is the first month or month and a half that I was in Italy, Colonel Brown, who ended up taking over regiment after being the brigade commander at 173rd, he ended up becoming the regimental commander for the Ranger regiments.
Sure.
And he was doing his welcome to Italy, and he was like, let's give a hurrah for the last combat deployment to Afghanistan for the 173rd. And I'm going, what? Are you kidding me? Like, I do all of this train up, and you're going to lay this on me? Like, what? And so I end up getting to 3rd platoon and meeting the guys, and it was very unique, and we can definitely go into it. And one of the things that was kind of memorable when I got there was I met the platoon sergeant, and I think he's a sergeant major now, and he called me into the first sergeant's office with him, and he's like, I know who you are. Roger, Sergeant. PFC Eichholz. And I'm like, I don't know what's going on here. He's like, no, I know what you are. And I'm like, I have no idea what you're talking about, Sergeant. And he's like, you're a quitter. And I'm like, I didn't have anything to say. And he's like, get the hell out of the office. And that was my first introduction, and total gut check. But again, like I think it's paramount because we dwell so much on the negative. We don't look at the opportunity for growth, and we look for sympathy first instead of perspective. And so I absolutely could have quit. There. There was a kid that showed up at the unit around the same time as me, and he said he was going to kill himself. And, the first time you say that in the Army, even like jokingly, they're like, get this guy away from guns, and you
Sure.
know, they take shoelaces and they basically just kick you right out of the Army, you know. And I could have done that, but I was like, no, I got to do this. So
now that unit, like you had said, they had just come back from a deployment. They had lost Sergeant First Class Metcalf.
mm-hmm.
What do you remember about how he was killed?
So being 25, being a private first class, I'm like the chauffeur for everybody in the platoon. My platoon, they're a mess, but I love them. They're a mess for a reason. You know, some of them came in as a mess. But what happened to those guys, it really shaped who I am as a human being, and kind of like a huge transition for me when I went into the Army was Sergeant First Class Metcalf and Mr. O'Rourke's death in combat. That incident in itself shaped the guys around me, and they shaped me. So it was, from what I understand, it was a red on blue. The interpreter, you know, Sergeant First Class Metcalf gets out of the. I don't want to speak out of turn because I wasn't there, obviously. But from what I heard was he was getting out to check the comms, and as he got out, the interpreter shot him, and it was a big firefight. And Mr. O'Rourke was the contractor assigned to the platoon, and he was killed as well. You know, Sergeant Walkup was their FO. He's still alive to this day. I think he was shot 7 or 8 times in the pelvis. He's a huge man. He's now gunsmithing down in Tennessee, which is super cool. But he ended up transitioning out of the military because of that incident. Then I think the medic, he also got shot. I didn't meet everybody, because some of those guys were immediately transitioning out. But
the reason I bring that up, and I mentioned Sergeant First Class Metcalf specifically, is, and you've sort of alluded to it already, Brandon, it sounds like almost a parallel to when you started as a personal trainer. You had all this kind of buildup of how it was going to be for you, and then it changed immediately, or you had this enormous reality check immediately. You get to your unit ready to be an infantryman, ready to be the best soldier you can be, and they look at you and say, you're not one of us. You have to prove yourself to us. Yeah. Tell us about the mopping incident.
So I think that's, and I don't know if we said this earlier. You know, my mind kind of wanders specifically onto whatever we're talking about. But we have expectations. I think we did talk about this, expectations with spouses, relationships, kids, all of that, and you haven't done the work.
Sure.
You know, so I think that's kind of the reoccurring trend. Maybe it's not imposter syndrome. Maybe it's just I expected things to be one way, but I hadn't done the work for them to be that way. You know, and I think that's maybe more of what I've experienced. So, you know, like I said, I was 25, so I was on time every time they needed me to be somewhere. I had all the equipment. I didn't drink. You know, I just wasn't interested in it. You know, I worked out twice a day, so in PT and then outside of PT, because I just didn't do anything else. I had a whoopee in my barracks room, and a pillow and a laptop. That's all I had, and toothbrush and razor. That was it. You know, that's all I had. My squad leader was like, you need to put something on the wall because you look like a serial killer. I'm like, all I do is sleep in here, like, and then eat tuna or chicken and then sleep. That's all I do. And so they didn't really have an opportunity to smoke me or correct me as much as they probably wanted to. And I had an ego about me, and I'm sure people will listen to this and think I have an ego as well, but I want to stress, like, I had an ego for no reason. I had an entitlement for no reason. I hadn't done anything. I hadn't experienced anything. I hadn't made it. And Specialist Minot at the time, that was who was the kind of the head honcho of hazing the new privates. And it's appropriate. I should clarify, it's appropriate specifically for infantry. Sure. You need that. And I learned this in this incident here. And, you know, he's like, hey, Eichholz, go mop that grease stain on the floor. And the cool thing about Minette is he wasn't like a Rhodes Scholar by anything, but this dude can work. Like he could work and work and work, and that's how he got to where he was, you know. And I think in one of the other podcasts I said he wasn't so smart, and I was being pretty rude. But he was a hard worker. You know, there's like smart Rangers and then there's strong Rangers.
Sure.
Minette was a strong Ranger. And he was like, mop this grease stain. And he had it out. And I know why he had it out for me. And he's like, mop this grease stain. I'm like, dude, this is concrete. I'm not going to mop this. It's not going to come up. I'll go get mop and then what is the Simple Green? What's the Army got a truckload of Simple Green? Yeah. I'll dump Simple Green on the floor and it won't pull the grease because it was CLP. Yeah. It's not coming out of concrete. And he's like, I didn't ask you if it'll come up. I told you to mop it. Dude, I'm not going to mop it. I told you to mop the floor. When you get stripes, then I'll listen to you. And, like, that was the moment, like, the powder keg exploded. You know, the grenade proverbial pin came out, and Minette's coming off the table. And Specialist Smith, or Smitty, he grabs me and takes me out and takes me into the outside area. And he goes, what the hell is wrong with you? You know, now Smitty was 37 at the time. I was 25 or 25 or 26. And he's like, he actually has an English major, I think. I'm pretty sure. And Smitty, great guy, ended up doing PA in the military later. And he's like, what is wrong with you? And I'm like, what are you talking about? That grease stain's not going to come up. And he's like, it's not about the grease stain. He told you to do this. And I'm like, but he doesn't have stripes. And he's like, yeah, but he has this. And he's pointing to the combat patch. He's pointing to the CIB. Yeah. And he goes, 8 months ago, you were sitting at home eating chips on the couch. Now, mind you, that's not necessarily what I was doing, yeah. But that's what I was doing. I was a civilian. Sure. 8-9 months ago, you're sitting at home. I think he probably said 10 months ago because it was September is when the incident happened. He's like, you were at home while we're losing our platoon sergeant, while the guys that we're supposed to trust are shooting on us, yeah. And you were at home, and you can't handle somebody telling you to mop the floor, mop a grease stain. This is your problem. And I don't know if Smitty remembers that. I don't know if he remembers that conversation, but it was huge. It was huge for me because it was like, I haven't made it. I haven't earned anything. And like I would come in every day, you come into the company area and there's these pictures and it's everybody that's died from Destin Company. And, you know, like I said, selfishly, I joined to just get a tech job, to just go to college. And when that moment happened, I was 100% in. I'm doing it. I'm doing whatever you need me to do. I'll be the RTO. I'll be the master driver. I'll be the master gunner. I'll do all of it. I'll take the stupid P course so I can be the inspector for P. I'll do whatever you need me to do. Like anything that popped up, I volunteered for. If you guys looked at my military driver's license, I'm licensed for everything. The master driver for the company, for the Fusion company, which is the Foxtrot company, the support company, he loved me because he's like, you're always on it. Like you come in here, you PMCS everything the right way we showed you. You don't slack off. You're not on your phone. You're just getting it done, and you're done quick. And I'm like, yeah, because I don't want to be here. I don't want to stand around all day. Like, I got things to do.
You want to do it right the first time.
Right. You know, and so we would go on rotations. Like, we would go to Slovenia. I remember this one specifically. They killed a bear right before we pulled into Slovenia, into the camp. So Slovenia is one of the coolest countries on earth, the coolest people on earth. And we're on this tour bus coming into Slovenia to do some training with the Slovenians, and they, like, stop the bus, and you hear this huge rifle, bow, bow. And we're like, what are they doing? Like, we've worked with plenty of foreign countries where they do some wild things that we are not allowed to do. And this guy gets on the bus and he's like, oh, it's okay, First Sergeant, we killed bear. Oh my gosh. Come on in. You know, and we go in, and in this rotation, I was the RTO, I was the master driver. So like I'm putting the chop blocks out, I'm putting the drip pans out, I'm checking the trucks, and I'm getting, I think like we would have a call at like 6 or something, 06, because we're out in the field, and then we got to get the trucks ready, and then we got to go on the operation. Well, I got up at 04, and I would get the radios all up. I would do all the fills on the radios. I would put them in the packs, and then I would put them in the specific trucks, and then I would start the trucks. I would check the the JP8 fuel, make sure the fuel's all good to go. And like, it sounds really nerdy, like right now, just going through the list, like that I somehow remember all of this stuff, but it was the intent. It was the intent that I was showing that I know I didn't earn it, but I want to earn it. When we talk about having expectations on life, people don't have intent. They have desire. We have goals. We have expectations. We have these things that we want to accomplish, but we lose intent because we get distracted by things. And for me, in that moment, I was distracted because I was wearing the uniform, because I had the patch on my left shoulder.
Sure.
And I thought I'd made it. I didn't.
It's a huge perspective shift, it sounds like.
Yeah. I mean, I think for me, life is always about learning. Mm-hmm. It's always about trying to understand why and figuring out where and how we can maneuver and get to the next level. And so, like I said, I've had a monologue since I was a kid. So
this is what's interesting to me. You sound like you became a model soldier in so many different capacities, and then your contract ends, and you decide not to re-up for active duty. Mm-hmm. Tell me about that decision.
Well, so I became a model soldier. I got promoted in 2 years of being in the Army, and I came in as a PFC, so that's fairly quick. And I was fighting, like I was nasty. I, like all the other specialists, I was like, "Oh, you're getting a waiver? Why are you getting a waiver? You sure you should get a waiver?" Nah, I get a waiver. That's what I get, the waiver. And like if you were in another platoon, you were my enemy. Like 3rd platoon was the only platoon that existed. That's great. And it just shifted, like everything shifted now. And this was a little bit of a challenge, and because like I said, I was in ministry school, and ministry and in the infantry, they don't exactly match up. So there was some friction there. There was some things that I had to overcome. I still didn't go out and drink. Still didn't go out to, I did have to go to, the Russian pub, which is the big stomping ground for the 173rd. It's like right outside, and a lot of 2503rd guys go out there. It's this guy, I can't remember, I think it's Giancarlo is his name. And he makes a lot of money off of American soldiers, and makes a really good burger when you're, 5 or 6 beers in. So I did get promoted in 2 years. I ended up getting put in the NCOIC role for the rear detachment. So we got spun up for Operation Atlantic Resolve. So the Ukraine stuff that we're currently dealing with.
Sure.
Yeah. We were spun up for all of that.
Oh,
sure. So going into Ukraine, then going into Estonia, going into Poland, we spent so much time in Poland. But I ended up for Poland before I got promoted. Let's go back a little bit. So before I got promoted, I was on the talks of getting promoted. I was like going to either get corporal or I was going to get my stripes. I was going to go to the board and get my stripes. And then they're like, "Hey, we're going to Poland. You need to just get your stuff ready." And I'm like, okay, well, I'm just going to go to Poland and be a rock star and get my guys, because the way I approached being better was getting other people better. Mm-hmm. Because I was already good at PT. I was already good at shooting. I was already good at enduring stupidity because I could just endure. But it was getting other people to move with me that made the difference in me being a good soldier. Sure. It wasn't like I was not Captain America. I'm still not Captain America. I'm 5'8", 175, 85 pounds. But it was getting others to go with me that was making the difference. And so when we go to Poland, I'm like, all right, well, I'm going to be a squad leader. My section sergeant's like, "Hey, we've got a squad leader's position opened up." And we ended up having a couple like guys that came in from other units or came in from the National Guard that joined our unit. And they're like, no, don't worry about it. My platoon sergeants and my section sergeant are like, "You're the next in line for squad leader. You're going to get your corporal, or you're going to go to the board. You're going to get it." Joke's on me. We go to Poland, and they end up giving the board slot to this guy who had been in the National Guard for 6 or 8 years or something.
And had just arrived.
And I'm like furious. I'm so furious. And then they bring this guy in. He was an E5, and he had deployed with the 101st. This guy, he was as dumb as a box of rocks. He was about as useful as a left-handed baseball bat. I mean, anything you could say. This guy shot an azimuth from a compass inside an up armor. And I'm going, dude, it's metal, you know? And so I was a tow gunner and a machine gunner, 240.
Nice.
And so I had that attitude where I'm like, I'm getting the waiver. That's how I was about shooting.
Sure.
That's how I was about shooting the tow. Like, I'm never going to miss. I didn't miss. I had some pretty long shots. I didn't think I was going to make all of them, but like that attitude, I had that attitude, like, I'm going to get this. And when they brought him in, you could just see he was so inept, and he was getting the guys scuffed up for stuff that was his fault.
Mm-hmm.
You know, like he was telling us the wrong time hacks. He was telling us the wrong places. He was telling us the wrong equipment. And then he would throw the guys under the bus. And so like a point of contrast for me in Poland was, I told him in front of section sergeant, in front of the guys, I said, I'm going to fight you. Take off your uniform. I'm going to fight you. You're a piece of shit. You don't care about these guys. These guys are my boys. I'm tired of this. Like, we did Pugils out in Poland, and I was like, oh, give him to me. And everybody knew I hated him. Everybody knew it, because it sounds weird, but in that mindset, in that mode that I switched to once that grease stain happened, I wasn't afraid. I respected the rank of everybody else, but I wasn't afraid. Yeah. So like our commander, Captain McCarthy, he was a Golden Gloves boxer, and I bought this heavy bag down in Poland at one of the malls and filled it. Oh, I filled it full of sand. That was so stupid. He loved it. I hated it. But like, I would end up boxing in the morning with my company commander, you know, like, so there was this like almost like weird kind of like college, right? Yeah. Because I respected the rank and them, but I wasn't afraid of them. Yeah,
that's the difference.
Yeah, and they could probably tell that.
Yeah, yeah, and so we're doing pugil sticks. And I'm like, I'm calling this guy out every single time. I'm like, I want you. You're not going to get away with this. I see what you're doing. And he's like, I'm going to scuff these, because he would scuff me up and I would just stare at him the entire time I'm doing push-ups. Like, you make me do jumping jacks, I'm just going to stare at you right in the face. Yeah. I do not care. And I ended up going to my section sergeant, and I was like, hey, I can't do this anymore, dude. This guy is so inept. And he's like, I can't do anything. And I'm like, okay, I'm going to go to the platoon sergeant. I go to the platoon sergeant. I'm like, hey, Sergeant Binge, he's a sergeant major now. Super, super awesome leader. I can't do this. This guy is awful. And he's like, stop. You can't talk to me about him like that, but I'm going to tell you what you do. You write everything down that he does wrong, and then you write down everything that you would do right. And then you come to me. Okay. So I did. So I wrote everything down that he would do wrong and everything that I would do right. Towards the tail end of Poland, he gets removed. I get promoted. Boom, bada bing. But I ended up getting put in the NCOIC role for the rear detachment on the next operation that they got spun up for Estonia. So here I am, newly promoted E5, in charge of the rear detachment for the company. So I'm like, talking to other first sergeants. I'm going to SAR major meetings. I'm like, SAR major kicked me out of the board because I said soldiers, or like, what did I say?
Men instead.
Yeah, I said men instead of soldiers. Yeah. And the support company first sergeant lost his mind because he's like, what, women aren't in the Army? And I was like, first sergeant, I don't work with women. And he did not like that. Neither did SAR major. And, so I'm sitting there like taking notes, E5, non-deployed, just trying to like run a company as a newly promoted E5. Yeah. And I did well. We had like, I think one incident where the commander, the battalion commander came down and something was stupid and I got my ass chewed. But like Brad Pitt says in Inglourious Basterds, I've had my ass chewed before, so.
Now, were you with the rear D because your contract was about to be up and they weren't going to deploy you? Is that why you stayed back? Career
I'm
D?
pretty sure that's what it was.
That's what I would
because I had
assume.
a year out.
Yeah.
Yeah. So to get back to your original question of like why I didn't re-enlist, I actually met my now wife that last year in the military.
It was through Tinder, right?
Yeah,
okay.
Tinder. So I had purchased Tinder because you could pay for it back in 2015 or so.
Seems like eons ago.
Yeah. You could pay for it.
Feels like a long time ago.
You could pay for it and set your location.
Okay, you get exclusive perks.
Right,
Okay.
yeah. So there was a benefit to it.
Even though you were in Poland.
Yeah, or Italy or Germany
Right,
or anywhere
okay.
I was at.
Yeah.
You could say you were somewhere else.
Right. Because I knew I was going to come back to the States. I knew if I re-enlisted, I was
Sure.
coming back to the States. I knew if I got out, I was coming back to the States. You know, one of the things that I was working on while I was there was I was trying to go to Ranger School.
Okay. So you wanted to have that experience.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah, because in the infantry world, the deployment patch is king. You could pretty much get away with anything if you've been deployed. If you have a CIB, that's even better.
Yeah.
The combat infantry patch. I actually did EIB before that mopping incident. And I made it, I think, because this was, the weird thing about EIB is they switch the model in which they grade every other year. So the year that I did it, it was like an event-based program. And then the next year they did EIB, which I wasn't there for because I was at BLC, Basic Leader Course, our Warrior Leader Course. Yeah. The next year they did it to where you practice the event and then you go on to another exercise. So when I did EIB, it was like an active scenario. And you have to do all the infantry tasks in this active scenario. And I was the only non-officer or senior enlisted that was in my company that was still in EIB. All of the guys that went on deployment, they're like, dude, this is stupid. I'm getting out. You should just drop out. And I'm like, no, I got to keep doing this. I don't have anything, and then I ended up, I think I failed on something really stupid. But after that grease stain, I was like, I'm going to do everything that I can to prove that I can make it, that I can be what I need to be. If a moment like what happened to Sergeant First Class Metcalf, I can be that person for that moment.
Yeah.
Because before then I couldn't. I don't know how I would have reacted.
You wanted the skill set necessary to know how to react.
I wanted all the skills on the board to say, this guy's going to perform this way. Yeah. And so I would go out and do every Ranger test that they had. Like my platoon sergeant would be like, hey, they've got an RPFT, the Ranger Physical Fitness test this day, and I'm out there. And then I'm out there for the next one, and I'm out there for the next one. And I think like it was the ruck for me. Like I couldn't get the ruck fast enough. Yeah. My run was good. My push-ups were good. All of that was good. It was like the ruck. I couldn't get it
12 miles?
Yeah, 12 miles. And I couldn't get it fast enough. And part of that, knowing now so many years away from it, it was placement of the ruck. It was, I didn't have it high enough. I didn't have it tight enough to my body. And so I couldn't ruck run as quickly as I needed to. So by the time I became the rear detachment NCOIC, I was getting pretty tired of trying. Yeah. Because I was 28, 27 at that time. I'm like, I don't know if I want to do this anymore. I got here. I watched Restrepo before I got here. These guys done some really cool stuff. The guys that I was in the platoon with, they did some really cool stuff. I didn't get to do any of that.
You kind of missed out on it.
Right.
Yeah.
And I'm like, do I want to keep playing infantry for nothing? Yeah. And so I had a lot of thought, and then I met my now wife, and it was the most promising person that I had met, most promising woman that I had met, as far as like a potential future relationship. Sure. It seemed like I kept acquiring broken butterflies from the time I was 18 to 27, and everybody came with baggage, and I was really good at fixing and then sending them out, and then they'd get married and have kids after having a few conversations with me. So
oh my goodness,
it was the first promising conversation with a girl that I'd had, and I was like, well, if I re-enlist, what is this girl going to do?
Sure.
You know, because I thought I was going to go to Campbell. That's because it's closest to St. Louis here. It's not a short, it's a very short drive compared to a 14-hour flight. So I was thinking on it, and the wild thing about that was we ended up getting a new first sergeant in that process of me being the rear detachment NCIC. And the first sergeant that I had, he's I think he might be out now, but he was a sergeant major as well, and crazy cool guy, very good leader, and he knew that I had it and like could see it and allowed me to be this wild character floating around Destin Company, just kind of like getting things done, like you know. So we had the new first sergeant come in one of those instances where I do wild things to get things done was I was doing awards, you know, so like I hated admin work, but we need awards done. I'm going to do this. I'm going to get these awards
Pick
done.
up the slack that needs to be done. Yeah.
I'm going to hammer this stuff into submission. Well, the thing about S1 and admin in the Army is they take their damn time.
Yes, they do.
And it's not even reasonable how the time that they take. It doesn't make any sense. Like these guys go on jumps with us and they pack the printer and the printer paper just so that they can meet weight, you know? And so,
that's awesome.
I'm getting awards done and I'm like, why the hell is this taking so long? You know? So we had this other ops NCO and he's like, man, you just got to work with the system. I'm like, that's stupid. Let's do this faster. Like this doesn't make any sense. They give you a template, fix the template, boom, go do it. And so I'm putting awards in and they're getting open. So it's Outlook. So you can see when somebody looks at it.
Sure.
And nothing's happening. And then like 3 days later, I get it kicked back. Oh, hey, this isn't right. And I'm like, you opened this 3 days ago, but you didn't send me the kickback until today. I have stuff I have to do. What are you doing? And this was a sergeant first class in S1. So I'm like, hey, Sergeant, I need this stuff to get done. And he's like, you know how many companies are in 2nd Battalion? And I'm like, well, you got Alpha, Bravo, Charlie, Destin, Foxtrot. That's a couple. And he's like, yeah, so you're not the priority. And I'm like, okay, roger that. So then I go back to the ops room, and this is when I got the new first sergeant. And so BCC is a thing. And so I emailed this guy. I CC my captain, my company commander, Captain Heath. Went to Clemson, super great leader. And then I CC First Sergeant D'Amico, great guy. He was with 2nd Infantry Division for a while, was with 82nd for a while. He's retired now. And then I BCC'd Sergeant Major Cashman, who was known as the Tornado.
Oh, yeah, the BCC is like a silent assassin.
Oh,
that's how you get people's attention real quick.
Oh, yeah. So Captain McCarthy or Captain Heath knew I was that was the way I operated. He didn't care. He was very soft spoken. Like if he yelled, you knew things were bad because he was just very level. First Sergeant D'Amico yelled all the damn time, and he'd get excited and he'd get loud. And he was a great guy. We ended up spending a lot of time together towards the tail end of my time on active duty. But he comes into the office and he goes, Eichholz, what the fuck did you do? And I'm like, what do you mean? And he's like, you BCC'd Sergeant Major Cashman, Tornado Cashman. Do you know what you just did? And I'm like, First Sergeant, yes, I did BCC the Sergeant Major, but this is stupid. Like, and he's like, you cannot. And I'm like, First Sergeant, if I screw this up, you can smoke me for an hour. I don't care. Like, this is stupid. This guy is screwing every company over because he's lazy.
Yeah.
And Sergeant Major ends up calling First Sergeant D'Amico, and he's like, what is this E5 nothing BCC and me on this? And
don't you know I'm the Tornado?
Right. He's chewing.
Self-described.
I mean, he was for sure. He's chewing First Sergeant. Then he starts to scroll down to see what the Sergeant First Class had said back. And he goes, hold on a second. Hangs up the phone. Boom, boom, boom. Goes over to the S1, which is right next to him. We get a response back. Your awards have been approved. No necessary adjustments needed.
Wow. It worked.
And after that, all of our awards was on a tempo. We did the template. It came back, oh, on the right time.
Oh, yeah.
You know?
You just have to train them, just like,
Just like
Train
the
them just
dogs.
like a dog. If I can put a prong collar.
I didn't want to say it, but
Yeah.
So meeting your future wife was a big driver for you to get out of active duty. When was it she saw the potential in your business venture?
Well, some of my clients would say I'm a contrarian. That's the nice way to say I'm argumentative. But I was destined to work for myself. I think that we value our own time better than other people. And so I applied that same approach to the Army. Like I would read, all of the different NCO guidebooks before I even went to the board, just so I could know this stuff. I bought this book as a PFC where it said like the NCO guidebook, and I'm reading it, because I know that my potential is so much higher and my time is so much more valuable. Mm-hmm. And so I was destined to work for myself. When I got off active duty, I ended up not in a good job. I worked for a porta potty company when I got out of the Army, because I was an 11 Bravo who didn't have any transferable skills, and one of my goals, or one of my thoughts, because a lot of my occupations have kind of like progressively changed and evolved or disappeared completely. And one of the occupations that I looked at doing when I got out of the Army was being in law enforcement, working for St. Louis County. And one of my good friends was working for St. Louis County while I had two good friends working for St. Louis County when I was in the Army. And one of my friends worked overnights, so we could talk. Mm-hmm. While I was in Europe and he was in St. Louis, and it was Officer Blake Snyder. And I got out of active duty in 2016 in May, so that's when I had my ETS leave or terminal leave or something. Sure. And then he got killed in October in Green Park. And my girlfriend at the time, wife now, she was like, "You're not doing that, because you carry a gun. Like your attitude, you're gonna be right there. You're gonna fight the fight." But it was hard. It was hard because he was a way better man than me. In all aspects. He was a very God-fearing man, and he didn't let law enforcement impact his love for his wife, his love for God, and his love for people. Even though he's dealing with people in their worst moments, he did the right thing.
His character held up.
Oh yeah, yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. Before we close and end by talking a little bit more about your business, because I want to make sure we get that in for our listeners. This is an aspect that I really want to talk about, Brandon, because this is something that affected me when I was in actually as well. So by March of 2020, as everyone here remembers, the world shuts down. For me personally, I was kind of lucky, actually. I was stuck in California on the Army's dime for upwards of 6 months before they knew what to do with us. So for you, at that point, 2019 to 2021, you were acting first sergeant of a field medical facility. During that time, you were not asked to have the vaccine.
No.
You were not instructed, directed, demanded to do anything of that nature. You re-enter the National Guard, and they ask you, where's your proof of vaccination? Mm-hmm. Something I just want to give a few stats here because I think it's kind of interesting. So at that point in time, President Biden had mandated the vaccine for federal employees and contractors, but not troops.
Right.
And so, I can remember this. It wasn't that long ago. There was this huge gray area that everyone was trying to figure out, are we considered federal employees? We're DOD. How does that affect us? And in fact, there was never a presidential mandate for the vaccine, but there was from the DOD. I'm forgetting the guy's name, General Austin, who became SecDef. So the SecDef had a mandate for all service members to have the vaccine. By January 2023, the mandate was expunged.
Right.
And as you know, I'm sure, soon after that, troops were being welcomed back if they had been involuntarily separated. And the number, I found this on DOD's website, actually, which is now the Department of War, or one of the names of it is anyway, by the beginning of 2021 till the end of the mandate through the DOD, upwards of 8,000 service members had been involuntarily separated.
Wow.
So it's a huge impact on our fighting force. Give us a rundown of your experience with the COVID mandate, how you were treated as someone who didn't want to do it. You had your own reasons. Tell us about that experience.
Yeah. So, going into the reserves and then going into the Guard for the second time, I was around like year 7. And like you said, I was acting first sergeant for a field medical hospital. And I was still E5 at that time. It's the Guard and the reserves. It's a interesting spot. There's more to that, but so I had been rated as an E8 in my last unit going into the Guard unit. Like, I'm coming back to St. Louis. I'm moving back to St. Louis. I'm going to the Guard, and the recruiter for that, he was like, "Hey, you'll be fine. You got an excellent NCOAR. You're gonna do great things. Yada yada yada." And then I called the unit, and they say, "Well, you need to have proof of vaccination when you come." And I'm like, I've been in a hospital unit for the last 2 years as the acting first sergeant, working with brigade commanders, like high-level people, and none of them had said any of this. I didn't even wear a mask the entire time, and it was a hospital unit, and so they're like, "Well, you need to have proof of vaccination." I'm like, "Well, I'm not going to do that." "Well, then you shouldn't show up, or you can't show up." And I'm like, "What are you talking about? It's not I'm not that smart of a guy, but the Missouri National Guard belongs to Missouri." Okay, it belongs to Missouri. And they were like, "Well, if you don't get vaccinated or you don't have proof, then you can't come." And I'm like, "Okay. All right." And it wasn't an easy decision, because at that point I'm looking at like years 7, 8, and 9, and I'm like, I had aspirations while I was in. I'm like, well, I'm going to climb this rank ladder. I'd like to at least come out with a rank that matches the year that I was in service. In the infantry, that's totally possible. And based on the performance and the trajectory that I was on and what I was rated as, that was totally possible. And my wife's like, whatever decision you make, I'll support you. And I was like, I'm just not going to do it. I'm not going to compromise my integrity to do this. It doesn't make any sense. This thing is new and earth shattering, and yet you already have a vaccine for it. Well, a little side note about my experience in service is I have vaccine injury from the time I got into basic training. My face, I have like a perpetual state of dermatitis on my face from getting into basic training, because prior to basic training, I never went to the doctor. I broke a leg, got a cast. That was the extent of me going to the doctor. Sure. My dad was poor. We didn't do, annual shots or anything like that. So when you go into the Army, they do all of those shots at once, regardless of whether you want them or not. And I go into basic shaving and my face is blood red. It's burning hot. And the drill sergeants are like, "Have you ever shaved before?" I'm like, "Drill sergeant, I'm 25. You're 26.
What do you think?
I've been shaving since I was 12. And they're like, "Well, you might be the first white guy to get a shaving profile." And I'm like, "Let's do it," but that was my history of it. And so I'm like, I'm just not going to do this. It doesn't make any sense. I'm not doing it. And they said, okay. And then they were texting me, messaging me saying, "Hey, you need to come in and sign your other than honorable discharge saying you're refusing a direct order." Direct order from who? I'm not doing it. And I'm not coming back either, because I had a sergeant major call me after it got lifted, and he's like, "Hey, I reviewed your file. I've reviewed your NCOAR, rated as an E8, and you're an E5. You need to be here. I have soldiers that need to be trained." And I said, "Sergeant Major, I don't mean to be disrespectful, but there's very little training that goes on in the National Guard, especially for the infantry." One of the things that totally derailed me and my motivation to be there was when I showed up after leaving the 173rd, having my first sergeant, who didn't think of me of anything, but then at the end of my service, he goes, "If I could get 40 more Sergeant Eichholz, we'd have the best platoon in the Army, because this guy just does not stop." Yeah. I say go, and he goes, "How high?" He goes. Like, he just does this. And he's like, what if I give you, he's like even offering me schools as I'm getting my farewell, you know, to, hey, you don't get a shot, you can't come. And it's like, I'm just not going to compromise my integrity. And you're telling me to come back. And so these guys were super quick to tell me not to show up because of a shot.
Sure.
They basically said, all your time in service doesn't matter. You're a scumbag. You're a shitbag. It doesn't matter what you were been rated as, what you performed as, but because you won't follow this one direct order that could impact the trajectory of your health, we're going to just treat you like gutter trash. I'm not coming back. I'm not serving with those guys. If we do get deployed, if we do get spun up in one of these National Guard incidents here in the U.S., and you're telling me to point a gun at one of my fellow St. Louisans, I'm not doing that.
Yeah.
I'm not doing that.
Jason and I just the other day were talking about the difference of National Guard and reserves. And, you know, I'm in the reserves currently, so I'm biased. I have my preference. But you're kind of speaking on exactly what I was telling Jason is one of the inherent issues with the National Guard, Brandon. As you know, you're controlled by the governor of that state.
Mm-hmm.
And he or she can use you in whatever way he or she desires. You know, you hope that it's always for the good of the citizens of the state, but occasionally it's not. So one more thing about the COVID vaccine. I know this can be a hot topic. It's kind of funny because everyone seems so happy to forget about it now. We're all back to our old ways.
Yeah.
But if you talk about it, people are still...
Very much so. It's still a hot topic.
Mm-hmm.
You know, you mentioned that some people call you a contrarian. I'm not far off from that description, probably. I like to think of myself as a skeptic. And a very similar emotion went through me when I was told, you need to get this vaccine or else we're going to start your out processing papers to kick you out. I wanted to be perfectly sure and confident that if I took a vaccination, it wasn't going to affect me or my future.
Mm-hmm.
Now, I ended up getting the Johnson & Johnson one shot. I got it because I wanted to stay in. It was that serious.
Right.
You do it or you're being kicked out.
Right.
And what you said earlier really spoke to me, Brandon. All your years of service, all the things that you had done, all the accomplishments that you had made and achieved, it's like they meant nothing in that moment.
Mm-hmm.
Do you have your vaccination proof? No. Okay, we're done with you. We don't need you. It's just an awful thing to hear someone like you, Brandon, who obviously, you know, you had your ups and downs in the Army through your career. Everyone does to some respect. But you wanted to be there.
Mm-hmm.
And you wanted to continue your career. And
yeah, I mean, there was something that I learned when I did get promoted to becoming an NCO is that you never need the Army more than the Army needs you.
Oh.
You know, and again, like I work for myself because I value my time more than anybody else does. You know, and it's, you have to look out for yourself because nobody else is going to.
Yeah.
And it's silly to think that, you know, that the government cares about you as much as your mom does, because they don't.
They don't. Yeah.
You know, and that's not like conspiratorial,
It's just
reality.
natural. They can't.
Right.
It's an apparatus.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Without feelings.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Which in many ways, it's good it's that way. It works. It works for the general population.
Yeah.
At the end of the day. Brandon, as we close, I know we talked a little bit about your business earlier, but what I'd love for you to do is give us your philosophy as a dog trainer. And I also want to hear about your intent to start with service dog training in the future.
Sure. So dog training, you know, for me, it's really about helping people. And that's going to sound super strange to people because they're like, well, you don't love dogs? And I like dogs. They're a utility, but I don't like dogs more than humans. You know, and I think that a lot of dog trainers get into dog training because they have dysfunction in their life and they try to create order by controlling the dogs, or, you know, like the emotional projection onto dogs. They get into dog training because a dog relationship is not a relationship that challenges them. Because the dog, you know, if you have a bad day, the dog's going to come to the front door. If you have a good day, the dog's going to come to the front door. If you're sitting on the couch eating Doritos for 3 hours, the dog's going to sit there right next to you. They're not going to judge you. They're not going to tell you like, hey, change yourself. So a lot of like people that are not willing to want to change will get dogs and they'll have these very, you know, inappropriate relationships with dogs. And so, you know, my approach to training dogs is to create clarity to the owners, because with the 200% boom in dog training since 2020, because I started my business in 2020. So maybe I'm part of that boom. But the difference between me and some of those other trainers is my grandparents started in 1955. My wife saw the spark for me to be a dog trainer in 2016, because her little bird dog hated men, and I scooped this dog up, picked this 35-pound of Brittany up and held her in my arms, and my wife's like, oh my gosh, he's the one. And that's literally what she says. Is like, because this dog has peed on other men before, and you literally pick her up. And I'm like, okay, and she also learned that she wasn't Dr. Doolittle. But like, a lot of it has to do with the fact that, like, when I was a kid, my grandmother taught me from a very young age, like, don't trust an animal unless you've taught something. Because a lot of people, like, I'm good with dogs. The dog gets them in the face. Sure. I don't have any scars on my face. I have scars on my arms and my hands because dogs bite me in the arms or hands, but they don't bite me in the face because I'm not being stupid. So my wife saw that. We started the business. And, I've got 107 right now. I think I've got 175-star reviews on Google.
That's awesome.
Because I believe in providing the best service for people when they come in. I work with puppies to reactive dogs, any breed, any age, any issue. My program is very easy to follow. It's a 5-week program. We specialize in teaching people. And by we, I mean me, because it's just me. So specifically obedience training, behavior modification, you guys do refresher courses, and you also offer boarding and training. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So, the obedience aspect, and I should unpack this just because this is the most important aspect. Like parenting today, parenting hasn't gone out of style. The version of parenting that we apply doesn't work. So in 98 and 2000, positive psychology was kicked in. That's kind of the trophy generation. If you guys ever wonder where did that come from, it's 1998 to 2000. Well, they applied that same metric to dog training. They said if you make everything sweet, everything beautiful, if you avoid conflict, if you avoid correction, it will make healthy, happy dogs in the long run. And they said the same thing about kids. Instead, we have more school shootings, more SSRI dependence, more issues with kids.
Mental health issues.
Right.
Yeah.
So maybe it isn't all positive. And so when I say obedience, this is where people struggle because they can go to Google and Google PetSmart or Petco. They offer obedience. However, what my definition of obedience is a lifestyle. So the dog is supposed to do what I ask when I ask it. Most dogs can do sort of that. The third and fourth task is where you make the difference with any dog that you're talking about. Number 3, they have to do it no matter what. So when you say, oh, my dog can sit, but that's not obedience.
Sure.
Imagine if you had kids and you were like, my kids are good, but they're not good.
Yeah.
There's a criteria for their goodness. There's a criteria for their manners. So now you're talking about a species that we can't communicate with. And you're saying they can't do it because of whatever. So do what I ask, when I ask, no matter what, and hold it until I release you. Well, my dog can hold a sip for the treat, and then they leave. Again, imagine if you're like, hey, come over here, I'm talking to you, son. And they go, oh, okay. And then they leave.
Yeah.
That's not going to work. And then when you're talking about behavioral issues with the dog, that's it. It's the same thing with kids. You put in the time, and I ask that my clients do 1 hour a day with their dog, which actually turns out to be 4% of the total day. Imagine I'm only going to interact with you in an instruction and disciplinarian sense for 1 hour a day, 4% of the total day, and you're supposed to listen to me like clockwork. The math doesn't math there.
Yeah.
I got to change you to change the dog.
Yeah.
So I actually, yesterday or 2 days ago, I sat down with a family and they wanted to come in for a board and train. And then I told them, I said, board and train makes me more money, but one-on-one is where people change and where the dogs change forever.
Yeah.
So, and it's like $650 versus $2,500. So just so people know.
I know I would appreciate the honesty. I'm sure your customers appreciate the honesty too.
Mm-hmm.
And it makes a lot more sense now that I think about it, because part of your philosophy is to change the behavior of the pet owner, not just the pet. So they need to be involved in that process.
Yeah, if you want, like we've talked about this once before, if you want something different, you have to be different.
Mm-hmm.
you're not going to be more financially lucrative working less hours. You're not going to be more fit by eating the same way, by exercising the same way. You have to change in order to see whatever it is that you want. Otherwise, you just need to shut up and stop complaining.
Yep, absolutely.
The last thing before we close, Brandon, I just want to give you the opportunity and the floor to talk about your passion for, hopefully at some point in the future, starting a service dog training type business.
Yeah, so I'm looking to start a 501(c). We've got everything set up for it. We just need to pick a name and pull the trigger. But my goal would be to move away from the pet world exclusively and go to service dog work, because the ADA doesn't require any training or certifications for service dogs. So literally anybody can start a service dog program. And one of the things that I think I do so well with dogs and dog owners is that I know the history of dog training. I know, a lot of the breed characteristics, the usages for dogs. So it gives me a different perspective when working the dogs. It's not like, oh, well, Rottweilers are known to do this, so it's okay if they do this. Like, I know what a dog's purpose is and like what the potential could be. Why do we typically see labs, poodles, or golden retrievers for service work? Because generally they're going to be the best suited. And then like for me, like I want to ensure that the dog isn't creating more complexity for the person that's getting it. Because a lot of like I've got a hole in my forearm, or actually my wrist, from a $30,000 service dog. So this was a Finnish dog that this family bought, and it was $30,000, and they had to crowdfund the money for it, and it was for their 3-year-old who has type 1 diabetes. And this dog would alert anytime it was nervous. Well, it's supposed to alert when the kid's insulin levels are rising. So kind of like a second eye for the mom.
Sure.
Because she's got this reader on her watch, and she's like, dude, what's the dog doing? Well, the dog is anxious and nervous because the owners of that program don't know how to train dogs, but they have a child with type 1 diabetes, and they got really passionate about turning out service dogs for this need. Yeah. And it doesn't matter how passionate you are about dogs. If you don't have logic or common sense, you're going to screw yourself because it's an animal. At the end of the day, I don't know what the dogs are thinking and feeling. I'm not a dog whisperer. If you come into my facility and you call me that, I'm telling you to leave. It's not real. It's a gimmick.
Yeah.
All I know is that if I do this and the dog does that, I'm going to do this, and it's trial and error. And so with the service dog program, I want to be able to pair up dogs. I would really, ideally, I would like to be able to donate these dogs to veterans specifically. I obviously I'd have a model for people to pay for the dogs and then do that, but I would like to be able to donate these dogs to veterans, because I think that we could do another episode just about this issue in itself, but I think veterans having a purpose and a reason to get up and progress is a benefit. There's a book called Wounding Warriors, and you guys can read it, and it's a very interesting take on the VA system. People in the VA probably won't like that book, but it talks about how, care looks different. It's not just money. It's not just counseling sessions. Like, you need to proactively do something.
Sure.
So I'm looking at that. I've actually been in contact with the VA about continuing education and becoming a psychiatrist myself.
That's great.
That's a whole different rabbit hole. We can unhash that or whatever if you guys want, but it's something that's in the pipeline.
Something I feel bad, actually, Brandon, because I didn't give you the opportunity to do the bookend of your military career. So here's the question I ask, and you can answer it whatever way you want. Did the way that you exited the Army affect how you felt about the Army?
No. I'm not defined by what I've done. I'm defined by who I am.
There you go.
And I think that for a lot of veterans, they struggle with that because that was the time that they were the proudest of themselves. And the reality is that you can be proud of yourself every day. And you don't have to do super huge things. You don't have to do crazy things. You just have to do something. And one of my mentors going into the military was a man named Mike. and he was a Black Hawk pilot in Vietnam, and he never talked about any of that with me. He taught me about beekeeping. He taught me about his wife's insatiable need to be a pack rat and go to thrift stores and stuff like that. But he was a Black Hawk pilot, and he's struggling with Agent Orange right now, and it's eating his body alive. And guy just he did, and it wasn't he was ashamed of it or anything. He was just like, that's what I did.
Yeah,
so humble. Dude was a Black Hawk pilot in Vietnam. You know, like landing these big old Hueys into the gunfire and like taking ricochets through the windshield and dealing with Agent Orange. And he's like, yeah, it's just a thing I did. And I feel like there's another book that veterans can read or people can read called Tribe by Sebastian Jungerman. And he followed my unit in Restrepo. So he's the wartime journalist. And he talks about like the decline in casualties of war, but the uptick in suicides and how there's kind of an incentive to be broken. You know, they make war movies and we talk about war and we, you know, we highlight all of these things. And so it's like perpetually in our heads. And, you know, and he drew the parallel in the book to like sexual assault and how they don't make books on sexual assault, but they do make books on war. And so, you know, whether some veterans know it or not, they are potentially incentivized to be broken.
Sure.
You know, and think about how many times you go in somewhere and somebody's like, oh, are you a veteran? You know, I can't tell you how many times somebody's asked, like, you know, have you seen a dead body? You know, or, you know, when I was
crazy talk, man.
Yeah.
When I was going through the VA and getting my health looked at, you know, basically at the end of my service, after all the jumps and crazy stuff, I had this company that reached out that wanted to help me. And they were like, you didn't put PTSD on here because I don't have it. And they're like, well, you know, have you seen a dead body? And I'm like, yeah. I mean, I've done a few suicide calls, you know, where I've had to see dead bodies. And they're like, well, then you have PTSD. I don't have PTSD. If I had it, I would put it down. And they're like, well, this would get you a guaranteed 100%. So what's the point here? You know, what are we trying to do? I don't have it. I don't need it. And so I mean, I could talk about this stuff forever, but I think both of those books, Wounding Warriors and Tribe by Sebastian Jungerman, would be good books for your audience to read.
That's a great perspective, Brandon. It's an absolute pleasure to get to speak with you. Absolute pleasure for us to have the opportunity to share your story and your experience. Thank you for being so open about it and so frank about the things, good and bad. Really appreciate your time.
Yeah, no problem.
Man. Pleasure meeting you, man. We're so glad that we had you on the show. We're going to go ahead and sign off of the Operation Inside podcast from the Mid-America Veterans Museum.
Operation Insight is brought to you by the Mid-America Veterans Museum, where we believe every veteran has a story. If you agree and you enjoyed today's podcast, please take a moment to like, subscribe, and leave a review on whichever platform you listen. Don't forget, sharing this episode with friends and family is a great way to support the museum and our mission of sharing veteran stories. Thank you for listening.